Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I am your All Sports Alpha, Leonardo Velasquez, and I hope you all are having an amazing week and had a great weekend watching all these amazing NFL playoff games and the national championship that just occurred yesterday between Indiana and Miami. We have lots to talk about, a lot of predictions to make, and it's an exciting time because now we're getting closer to that time where we will find out who will be the two teams that go to the Super Bowl. We have some, things to reflect on with these games that just occurred this weekend. So let's get right into it. We're going to start off with the NFL games. And really, we're going to start off with what I thought to be one of the most impressive performances of the playoffs so far, and that was between New England and the Houston Texans. So the Patriots, they found a way to really stay in rhythm. They didn't let their turnovers cause any disruption on offense for them. I think it showed a lot of sign of composure, especially from Drake May. And what impressed me about him was after that fumble that he had in the first half, it really allowed, you know, it gave the opportunity for Houston to stay in the game and possibly put points on the board, but the defense of New England stayed composed and they just kept putting on that pressure on CJ Stroud. Obviously, CJ Stroud, he threw four interceptions and he had a QB rating of, I'm pretty sure it was 29 or something like that. So it was very low, very, very poor performance from CJ Stroud. And I think the defense for New England really stepped up and should really get a lot of credit for how they played, by giving New England the lead for majority of the game. And overall, I think Drake May stayed very composed. He made some very good plays when he needed to. And that's really what it comes down to. That's what we've seen from the New England Patriots this season, where when the time comes where a big play needs to happen, Drake May and the offense, they find a way to deliver when it matters most. And we saw that against the Chargers, and, they're still delivering when it matters most. And I think as you get these playoff wins under your belt, next thing you know, when you get to that big game, the AFC Championship, I feel like it can relieve a lot of pressure that you may have had leading going into the playoffs. So now that they have these two good wins, I think the sky's the limit for the New England Patriots. They look very composed. They have great chemistry, a lot of good energy going around the team. So very impressive win from the New England Patriots. And now we move on to the Buffalo Bills and the Denver Broncos. What a controversial game. What a, back and forth shootout battle straight to the end, overtime. I think overall, it was incredible how, you know, all these two teams gave it everything they had. Obviously, that call with it being either a catch or an interception really, changed the dynamic of the game. And overall, it just seems like a lot of people thought that the Bills got screwed over by that call, but it does seem like it was an interception. So I think it was just all about towards the end of who could deliver when it mattered most. And that's what really happened. I mean, I knew that, there was a possibility that it could have been a shootout because, I've been saying for the past few weeks that the Buffalo Bills don't have a great defense and they just rely too much on Josh Allen in the offense, and then that gives Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos enough time to really start getting into the game because usually what I've noticed from the Broncos is that they start off slow and then they just they start turning it up by like the second half, especially like in the fourth quarter because they always have those close one possession games and they find a way to win. And I think that experience with those close one possession games throughout the season really came into good use for them against the Bills, considering that it was such a tight game until the end, especially going to overtime. But unfortunately, now the chances for the Denver Broncos have slightly diminished due to the ankle injury that Bo Nix sustained during the game, and now he is out for the rest of the playoffs. He will be out for the AFC Championship against New England in Denver, and Jarrett Stidham will take his place. So we will reflect on that in a few minutes, but now we will move on to the NFC side of things between we had the LA Rams and the Chicago Bears. What a magical game it was. We thought, it seemed like that the Chicago Bears were going to pull off some last minute magic again like they did against the Packers, but it just seems like one mistake became too fatal for the Bears, when Caleb Williams threw that interception and it allowed the Rams to really seal the game, put themselves in field goal winning position, and it saw them get the win. Overall, I think this game really showed a little bit of resilience and a little bit, I would say, of composure from the Rams side. I think for the first time in a while, I've seen them make some great plays on defense, and I think they held their ground when it mattered most. And I think that's something you want to see heading into these later rounds of the playoffs because, for a while it just seemed like they had a problem similar to the Bills where they relied too much on their offense. But next thing you know, this game, it wasn't too high scoring. So I think that's a good sign for the LA Rams, especially going up against the Seahawks. Obviously, we know the game that occurred between those two almost a month ago on Thursday Night Football, and it was just a classic. So we can hope that it's a great battle in the NFC Championship. And now moving on to the Seahawks and the 49ers. I knew the Seahawks would win, but I figured the game would be a little bit closer. But the Seahawks, they really took care of business. They did not look back at all at any point in the game. They ran up the score on the 49ers and they just completely shut them out. Enough said, over 40 points scored. They didn't allow the 49ers to get into double digits. I don't know what else we can say about that. It was just a, flawless performance from the Seahawks. And I think in a game like this where you're in the playoffs, you got that first round bye, you want to establish yourself as still, you don't want to have that first round bye rust linger a little bit, but they got straight to business. And I think this is a good win for Sam Darnold, considering that he hasn't had too many big game moments and experiences under his belt. So I think now going into the NFC Championship, it's just only going to help the Seahawks. And I really like the Seahawks' chances of beating the Rams. So now we can just transition into our conference championship predictions for both the AFC and NFC. So we'll just start off with the NFC Championship since we already started talking about the Seahawks and the Rams. I'm going to go with the Seattle Seahawks to beat the Rams. I just think that the Seahawks have lived up and have had some great performances in the last few weeks, especially going into the playoffs. And I just think, being at home will help them out even more. I think Sam Darnold has now had some great performances and good wins under his belt that can be good experience for him, especially at a crucial point in the season, like at this point being in the NFC Championship, one win away from going to the Super Bowl. And I just think there's been a mixture of luck, but also, good play for the Rams. And I don't know if that's going to work out well against the Seahawks. I think the Seahawks have a great defense, and I think they've shown that many times. So I'm going to go with the Seahawks to take care of business and advance to the Super Bowl and represent the NFC division. And now we'll go to the AFC side of things. I'm just going to keep it straight and simple. I think if Bo Nix was playing, I think we would be talking about a very close matchup, a very good battle. But I think now I'm really leaning towards the Patriots of winning and going to the Super Bowl. I just think, New England is now, you know, they got some good wins under their belt, close games, tight games, good defensive performances, and I think that's going to be to good use. Also, New England hasn't lost a road game at all this season, and it will be interesting because I know they don't want history to repeat itself in the scenario where Tom Brady and Bill Belichick could not win a playoff game in Denver. They were 0-3 in Denver, so we'll see if Mike Vrabel, Drake May, and the rest of the team can change that history and advance to the Super Bowl, which I think they will. I just think they've gotten better and better in these playoffs. After the first game, they struggled a little bit on the offensive line. That made me get a little bit doubtful for the Patriots going into the game against the Texans, but it seemed like they fixed those problems going into the Texans match. And then next thing you know, the defense stepped up big time when the offense was kind of stale for about a quarter. And I think that's what's going to come into good use in the AFC Championship. So give me the New England Patriots to beat the Denver Broncos and advance to the Super Bowl against the Seattle Seahawks. And it will be an exciting weekend. And I think overall, we are, I think this is the most exciting time without a doubt, I think, for sports because, we have so much going on. We have, we're in the middle of the NBA and college basketball season. We got the Australian Open currently taking place, and, the Olympics are currently coming right up, and UFC is just about to return and make its debut on Paramount Plus. There's a big boxing day on January 31st. So there's just so much happening, which is so exciting, not just for me personally, as I'm sure is for all of you that love sports. And yeah, it's definitely looking forward to all these amazing matches and events coming up in the next few days and few weeks. And lastly, to reflect on the national championship, it was a great game. It was something that I hoped we would see. I didn't want to see another blowout, considering that Indiana was putting on some amazing performances in the last, two games that they played against Alabama and Oregon. But now, it was a great game till the very end. And I think, it came down to really like who was more, both teams were almost like it was practically an evenly matched game. I think Miami's defense really tried to buy enough time for the offense, Carson Beck, to stay in the game. Excuse me, to stay in the game. But I would say that Indiana's relentless efficiency on both sides of the ball, offense, defense, running, passing, whatever it may be, scrambling yards from Mendoza, I think that just all came into good use when it mattered most. And I think we saw that with Indiana. And yeah, I did predict that Indiana would win, but I think, I'm just glad it was a great game. It's something that, excuse me, it's something that a lot of people will definitely remember for a long time, considering that it's not every season you see an undefeated team, with the Heisman winner and win the national championship. Last time we saw that was with Joe Burrow and LSU. They he won the Heisman, they went undefeated, they went on to win the national championship, so it was a memorable season. And I think this is not only good for college football, but it's good for, the school as well, because now that Indiana has now asserted themselves into the picture, it can be one of those top, football programs in the collegiate sports around the country. I think this can definitely make the Big Ten a little bit more competitive now. You already had teams like Ohio State, Michigan. I know Penn State was starting to become a good threat in the last like 2 3 years, but now Indiana has asserted themselves into a football conference that not a lot of people thought that it could be that competitive. But I think this only helps the conference, but also the whole entire landscape of college football. So overall, it was a very exciting few days with all these amazing, games. And we will have lots to talk about in the next few days. Tomorrow, I will make a video reflecting on the first round of the Australian Open. Tonight, the second round of the Australian Open will begin just in 30 minutes tops. And we will also make a video this week reflecting on some recent games that just took place with the college basketball. And we will also make a video later this week as well, doing our predictions for the UFC event, first UFC event on Paramount Plus and of 2026, which is very exciting. So lots going to be happening on this channel in the next few days. And lastly, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys haven't yet, please like, subscribe, leave a comment if you guys want to see certain content, and even if you want to see, make some changes what you guys think I can improve on. I'm always all ears to hear some suggestions. But overall, I hope you guys have an amazing week and take care.